Hey, this Manna Mike. I'm not sure what you own, but this here is on the mark. Like a spiral from a 5-star recruit, we throwing darts, really focused. WD-40 couldn't stop the way we grinded. In the trenches, putting that work in, I relate to all my linemen. This is for the men, the boys do not belong here. Tiptoeing to the top, we doing cone drills. The hottest show in the world, you don't even gotta search. Steady putting in work, you see the sweat up on my shirt. They wasn't aware of us at first, we wasn't on their radar. Now every play that we make, they gon' say, similar to a razor blade, we gon' stay sharp. The news ain't official if it's not on the mark.
From the On Your Mark show, powered and sponsored by Epic Sports Apparel, every play I compete. Man, if that don't get you ready to fight somebody or do something during the day to get your day started, we're going to let you hit your mark right here every week from 11 to 12, live from the Fishbowl Radio Network. We got a special guest today. So we've been talking about things of exposure ever since we came out of the state championship. It's a weekly type thing where we want to give you tidbits, educate and elevate you on what you need to do exposure-wise. Well, my guest today is a living proof of trusting the process, of believing in your craft, and working while you wait. Tim Meadows is the father of Trace Meadows. Listen, all of the accolades you want as a high schooler coming out his senior year, where he just kind of took off and got everything that's coming to him. He's now at UTEP, University of Texas, El Paso, as an early enrollee in the class of 2024. Dual sport athlete, baseball, track, both sides of the football. But we're going to talk about all of that and more. But the reason that Tim's on today is to talk about the things that he and Trace and his family did to get him where he is now, which is the ultimate goal of going to school for free. We talk about these things all the time. Shout out to my guy, Coach Jay, on the road as we speak, tuning in today. Thank you for everybody for joining us. Of course, tap in on Your Mark Show YouTube channel. Every week we'll post a new episode from today. But we're going to talk to my guy, Tim Meadows, down in College Station, Texas. Tim, come on in, man. How you doing? Appreciate you giving us a little time today here.
Well, Mark, first off, man, it's an honor to be here. Honor to share this story of this experience with you, especially. You and I have talked offline at length over the last couple of years, and I got to tell you, man, like it's such a blessing as a parent to have people like you moving behind the scenes and working when you evaluate these kids and you see something that you believe in, and then being a source of information and advice and a calming voice of reason at times for those of us that needed it. But just a blessing to be here, man. I'm really excited to get a chance to share with everybody.
Absolutely, and that's why we wanted to bring you on today. We're in the midst of the off season when it comes to the recruiting cycle. The 24 class is pretty much done. The 25 is almost done when it comes to the top tier talent. So the 26 and 27 classes are very, very at the forefront of recruiting now as far as exposure. And what we like to do here is to talk to parents and players just to educate them, give them tidbits, and share recruiting knowledge that we have. But I think that your story, and this is something that we have been talking about a couple of months, and, it's finally here. But we're going to go back just a little bit. You've been a coach yourself, and Trace has been involved in athletics since, he was able to throw a ball. So talk about, start kind of where he started to come out of Little League into middle school and what that was like for Trace at that particular time.
Oh, sure, man. So if you don't mind, I'm gonna back up just even a little bit more, just to kind of share. It helps to set the framework for everything that we're going to talk about, and that is that just like you said, as soon as he could throw a ball. Well, it was even before that. It was that dude hit the ground running, literally. I'm not sure that he didn't run before he walked. And we as parents saw this guy that was an outlet. An outlet that was good for him physically and mentally. You take a you take a lion and you put him in a cage, and it gets rough on everybody. So we had to try to find every way that we could to provide him those physical outlets to allow him to continue to develop both physically but also mentally. And that was as a baby, right? But being a former coach, like you said, I was a college baseball coach at one point, right up until about the time he was born. But the idea was that we wanted to include him in as many things as we could to get him active. I was not a big proponent of youth football, ironically, because of what he's turned into as he's gotten older. But I kind of figured, man, he's probably got a certain number of knocks to the head in his journey, and I wanted to limit those for him as much as we could. So he was a high-level soccer player, and then he was actually a state champion swimmer at the age of 10. And those are things that I think have helped his growth as we went along, and then we get in through with playing, a ton of baseball, obviously, with my background. And so, but you kind of get yourself to a point where you get into that middle school area, right? That 7th, 8th grade area where you're opening up into the organized school sports. And he plugged into everything, right? We were playing baseball outside of school, jumped in, started playing, football in that junior high time, played basketball, ran track. And it was, I feel like I would like to tell you that I think it was pretty obvious to all of us that were watching at the time, like that he was a little bit different. He had some attributes, he had some gifts. And so it became the challenge of his mother and I to put him in situations to challenge him, but to grow him and to make sure that we're leveraging all of those different sporting opportunities to make sure that we're moving toward an ultimate goal of a well-rounded kid who knew how to handle his business. He was, learning all the lessons of the adversity, the competition, the physical nature of the different sports as they were. But we wanted to keep him well-rounded, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Well, development is the key. And you mentioned well-rounded in the sports. Even swimming, those are things in soccer, footwork, intricate muscle groups that you don't see just in football. Those are the type of things. And baseball, baseball is one of the hardest sports you can play. It's a high failure rate in it. And the mindset that you have to have when you play baseball can benefit you as you get older and you started developing those things. And Trace, we'll get to baseball as well, was a high-level baseball player in high school, had significant interest on the college baseball scene as well. But, as we all know, if you ever met and talked to Trace one-on-one, football is his bag. That's his thing that he really, really loves and was passionate about. But I think you mentioned the development early on competitively in all of those areas in those arenas, has turned out to benefit that. Just speak about, his competitive nature at a young age and, how that's progressed over time.
Yeah. So, frankly, man, I wish I could probably take more credit for, the development of this fierce competitor. I don't think that we did anything to hamper that by any means. His mother and I are both competitive people, just in anything. I figure if it's worth doing, it's worth winning. And we've really tried to pass that on to both Trace and his little sister. But it didn't take a lot there, right? Like the kid's just never been satisfied not being the best if he's getting involved with it. And so what we were able to do though is to take each situation, each sport on its own merit, and try to say, hey, these are the things that I think that we can really glean for him out of this, right? I mean, and I think that this idea is gaining a lot more traction currently, right? Like we're seeing things like with Christian McCaffrey, right? And talking about how Ed took that whole group of kids that he's got, those super athletes, and train them and put them in situations to allow them to glean the benefits of different aspects of training, right? Like they say Christian doesn't train like a football player. He trains like a track athlete. But we really just looked at the same things. You mentioned baseball, and I can speak to that more than anything, right? We talked about from the very beginning that baseball it's an individual sport played in a team setting, because it's a series of individual, especially from the offensive side. It's an individual battle, pitcher versus or the hitter versus the pitcher, and you're trying to figure out how to beat that guy to help your team. And you mentioned the high failure rate. That is the point of or the metaphor that baseball is for life. I had the opportunity to play for a little bit for Augie Garrido at the University of Texas, and he used to say it's the perfect metaphor for life. You're going to have this immense amount of failure that is going to teach you how to persist to get to the successes, right? Like, you look at the big league level, the last guy to fail 6 out of 10 times across an entire 162 game Major League Baseball season was Ted Williams, and that was in the 1940s. So we're talking about a guy who failed, 3/5 of the time, 60% of the time, and he's considered to be the greatest. It's considered to be the greatest individual season that anybody's ever had with a bat in their hand. So you just look at those types of things and say that's a deal that can create this ironclad will, this will to persist, to push through the failure, because that every failure gets you closer to your next opportunity to succeed. And then all the other sports, they all bring different things. We mentioned training like a track athlete, you get that explosion, and the competition, because if you're running races, which Trace was a pretty high level hurdler, shoot, man, you're running against, you can see those guys right next to you. You're ultimately competing against yourself and the clock, but at the same time, you got to beat that dude next to you, right? And so we just figured, like, this can't do anything but contribute to the development of this winner's mindset, and this mindset of a guy that's just never going to give up. He's going to continue to push, even when it's hardest. So we really just knew that those things were there. You and I have talked again offline about, faith being belief without proof. And sometimes it takes a big helping of faith in order to get through those failures until you know that you're reaching the level that that your potential would tell you is there.
Well, those are the type of things that, unless you're really proactive and tuned in to your athlete, you have to discover those as you go on. I can only speak from experience, coaching and being with my own kids in those particular situations in all sports. You have to step back and look at it, take your personal feelings out of it, and really give it a thorough evaluation. You being a baseball coach, I think you saw some of those things innately, and that takes you in another realm and gives you the chance to really step back and look and say, hey, what do I need to do to make him successful? What areas or avenues or strengths should I encourage and develop in order to help him succeed at what he wants to do? And I think those are the type of the things that you have to look for when you're doing an evaluation. You have to evaluate your own kids every time they step on the field, whether it's practice, whether it's game situations. And that's the reason and the genesis for the show, is just to give people those avenues to reach out to us, to connect with us, and myself and Coach Jay and a lot of the people that are involved behind the scenes with the show. Those are the type of the things that we do on a daily basis, a weekly basis, going around the country at 7-on-7 events, camps, and all the way through the season through state. It's a thing where myself, in our relationship type thing is, we want to give you positive reinforcement, but we want to give you the truth about what we're trying to do to help. And those are the type of things that, we want to discuss today here, talking about Trace and his journey to UTEP. But let's fast forward a little bit to high school. He goes into the 9th grade. He's probably one of the better athletes in his area, so to speak, when he goes in the 9th grade. So just talk about that, entering high school, and what the expectations were as he started to be a freshman.
Okay, and so it's really an interesting thing because it ties into something that you just said. So if you'll allow me, I want to double back to that real quick.
Go ahead.
Because I think that it'll bring us there. And that's just that, you talked about having to evaluate your own kid, which I think is, as a parent, is the single hardest part, short of not getting offended when even outside evaluations tell you something different from what you're receiving. The honest evaluation of your own child's true abilities. And one of the things that I was, if I'm literally, Mark, I hope at this point you know me. Like I don't take credit for any of this because it doesn't matter what I can do or did. It all came down to what Trace was able to do for himself. But the one thing that I think that I was willing to do early on was to say, I think I know, I think I see this, but I'm going to do everything I can to remove my fatherly emotional attachment to this and to reach out to others who I could trust to give me what I needed to know versus what they thought I wanted to hear. Right. And some of that can be, it can be a dangerous road because it's a fine line between somebody that you're paying to help develop your son or your daughter, just say your athlete. And so it could be real easy for that person to keep you on the hook with, oh man, no, it's there. It's all there. It's all over it versus, hey man, I'm reaching out to you, asking you to help me to understand if what I think I see is accurate. And maybe even leaving out what I think I see part and just say, hey, what do you see? And are we on the right track here? Are we having the right type of discussions about this athlete, right? And the trick to that was legitimately, man, you gotta get rid of the ego piece. You got to get rid of the idea that you've got to hear a certain answer. You've got to be willing to hear the truth because sometimes the truth isn't what you think and it's not what you would be hoping to hear, but you can't go forward with an actionable plan for that athlete to get them into the right situations if you're not working on good information, right? So that ties into around the time that Trace got into, going into the 9th grade, you go, well, man, I think I've got a pretty stinking good athlete. I got a guy that's, in 2 years of running track has only lost one hurdles race. I got a guy that's, consistently won the long jump and triple jump. I got a kid that has played, every down on both sides of the ball in football. I got a kid who can, he was never really good at basketball, but he always competed, right? He always had a lot of fun. He was kind of the young, we tease him. It's like, man, you're a tiny white Dennis Rodman. Like you're a menace.
Absolutely.
Nobody wants to play you.
Right.
I don't know that you'd be the first kid that they would pick in the draft, but nobody wants to play against you because you're gonna be problems for somebody else. But getting to that point, man, you're now like, we're removing all of the financial incentives for him being on the field. If that makes sense. Like there's no longer that I paid a certain amount of money to be a part of this organization and, going to have an expectation that there's a development piece, not just the pure, like we're putting together the best group of 7th grade, killers that we can win every game that we ever come to, but we're going to use this program as truly development going forward. But all that's gone. And so you get to the point where you go, all right, everything that we've done to this point, now it's time for you to prove it, right? And you're going to go prove it to guys whose job it is to win those games. They're not simply looking at how can they continue to develop. And so football still really wasn't sure, because he's never been the biggest kid. And you know that, right? He's now 6'1", 200, but he was never the kid that was just a Hulk, and he was never a head taller than everybody else. And so he kind of bouncing around. Like in ninth grade, all of a sudden they make him an outside receiver on the offensive side of the ball, which is different. Like he'd never done that. He'd always been some sort of like a complimentary running back type scenario or an H-back. But they put him on the outside, and you're like, oh, well, okay, let's see how that goes. Moves and starts playing a little bit as a linebacker. And you're just trying to figure out, okay, how's that going? And so that season was really interesting because it was freshman football. He played on the freshman team. We're in a 5A high school that has traditionally been successful. And they had a really, heavy class. And, frankly, he wasn't ready. He was 5'9", 5'10", 155 pounds probably in that fall. Fast forward a few months, and he hits a little bit of a growth spurt during the winter, gets a little bit longer, and he's running track with the varsity group. And that's when he's not playing baseball and he's starting in the outfield on our baseball team. And so you're thinking, okay, so I'm seeing some advancement here in terms of even the level that he's being given the opportunity to compete at. But you're still not 100% sure, right? Because he's continuing to grow and to develop. But it was tough. Like that was a tough spring because he wanted to compete at the highest level in track, but baseball and track are two very tough things to pull off at the high school level, at the same time because they're competing in the same season and there's only so many hours in the day. But we end that season, he ends up really only getting into one actual meet on the track side of things. He goes and competes at the varsity meet, the varsity district meet, I should say. And because of the layout of it, it's always on that week of Good Friday. And so we've got baseball all week long, but Wednesday was the prelims for the races. And they do all of the field events. And he goes out, dude, he goes 42 and a half, or maybe it was 42 foot 3.5 inches, and wins the triple jump in the district as a freshman, and has literally, it's the first meet he's done since the 7th grade because they had the COVID year in between. So you're going, okay, now you can't do that if you're not a pretty good athlete, right? Like the next time that I could ever see myself even attempting a triple jump would be the first. It's beyond me. But you start to see those things as markers and as indicators, like, okay, we've got a chance to have a really good athlete on our hands. And so I'm not really sure what you want me to cover from there, but that freshman year was a bit of like kind of the windows begin to open. If the front doors don't open to you yet, but the windows begin to, and you can start to see a little bit of light of day toward where this thing could be headed.
Well, that's kind of leading where we're going to next, because a lot of times kids come into, or parents and families come into as a freshman, maybe not with a lot of fanfare, but high expectations. Texas football is the most competitive arena of sports in the country. So to see varsity experience in any sport as a freshman says something that you can look forward to. And I know we had these conversations as the years progressed. I think I was introduced to Trace probably around this time, between his 8th and 10th grade year. I can't remember exactly when, but I would say somewhere around that area is when I started to see him. And
yes, sir.
You could see those flashes, and everything that you're saying says that there's an athlete in there, that there's athletic explosion. You can't be a hurdler if you can't jump and be athletic at the same time. Hurdling is probably one of the most difficult track events that you're going to see, because you have to have timing. You have to have, that same trail leg. My son's a track athlete as a junior in high school right now. So, he's run track since he was able to run. And,
right.
So you're being able to see these type of things and the training that goes into it. hurdling is specific. There's specific things that you have to do to be a great hurdler, and he was that throughout his high school years, going back all the way to his freshman year. But let's fast forward a little bit. You mentioned the growth spurt. You mentioned the things athletically that started to develop, which says there's a development piece that goes into becoming an attractive recruit, and no matter what sport you're playing, to college programs. There has to be something there that you start to see. Sophomore year, he goes into being a varsity starter. You mentioned him playing on the offensive side of the ball. That's where I first came and introduced to him, and he started to flip on both sides of the ball to where he is now. But the athleticism to play both sides of the football, to play multiple sports, all of those things go hand in hand, becoming an attractive recruit. So when he gets to let's fast forward to his junior year, there starts to be a little bit of a buzz around him as far as college programs' interest, but it just wasn't there at the level that maybe he was expecting. And I can go back to conversations that he and I had. Through messages.
Yeah,
he was one of those kids that always wants to know why or what he could do here or do that to be better. We had conversations where he'd send me his film and we'd look at it and I'd send him back what's good and this, and that. He was always detail oriented in what he did. From his training. Outside. You mentioned. We'll talk about that here in just a second. You mentioned the outside things that you did outside of his team sports with the high school. That's another avenue that you have to have. And the elite athletes do those things at the high school level to be successful. But junior year, let's go with football. Junior year, he's starting to be that guy. I believe he was all district coming out as a sophomore. He started, in his area. He was one of the better players in that part of Texas coming into his junior year. So just talk about his his mindset and what you guys were seeing coming into his junior season, which I think was a real important one for him.
Oh, no doubt. So the sophomore season was I think is one of those like seminal moments, right? Where if I was to say that I think that his journey as a football player, becoming a football player, and we have an inside joke about that, but his journey as a football player really started in that sophomore year, I think, because, that was the first time he got onto the varsity field. But it was an interesting one because being a baseball player and playing baseball at frankly, a high level, playing in national level, competition, really is a big time commitment. And so there's a ton of time that was always tied up with the training and then the travel and then the weekends here and there. And so like, especially in the summer, that's the big part of your non-school baseball stuff is during those summer months. And that got really hard to balance with the like your football off season, right? So football off season being done at the school during the summer. Well, shoot, man, in a 2.5 month summer, he may have been sleeping in his own bed less than half the time. So you're not going to be as available for some of that stuff as you would need to be if you're really trying to zero in on becoming a football player. The other part of that was he was undersized going into that year. He's still, at that point, probably, 5'11" and 5'10", 5'11", but 165 pounds. And they're watching him and have watched him over the previous years playing on the defensive side of the ball anyway, and thinking he plays like a linebacker, but he doesn't look like one, man. And there was a lot of concern going into fall camp in that sophomore year about his size and his ability to compete at a position. So there was fortunately there was a coach in the room, Brandon Phillips, who was coaching the secondary at A&M Consolidated at that point, who said, "Hey guys, if you guys are going to put him back and try to play him as a linebacker instead of playing him on the varsity level, having him play JV and play linebacker, give him to me. I'll take him." And they made him a safety. And we're talking, this is halfway through fall camp as a sophomore. So it took a little while. And that's where his first and what we've talked about, a principle that I'm hugely familiar with, going back to hearing it from Tony Robichaux at Louisiana Lafayette back in the early 2000s, even the late 90s, that work while you wait, because he had to work while he waited for the opportunity to become the guy. He was able to get in and plug in, as that's where we really start to see him getting his shot on special teams, both on the coverage and the return side. And that's really where he had the first glimpses of success. And that's where some of the confidence began to come from. But all that, that parlayed up through the year. And by the end, or really by, about a third of the way through the year, he's starting in the back end as a safety, having just become one. And it took a while. You could tell he was a little tentative. But at times you'd see him flash, playing deep safety. You'd see him flash and go, oh, he knows how to do that because he's been a center fielder for 10 years. But that all leads into the junior season. And around that time, I should say, going into his junior year is when we started saying, okay, bro, we've got to start to work on developing some physicality. We're going to have to put in some time somewhere. You're spread super thin when you're doing all these things. And I don't know that any of them are worthy of giving up, but we've got to figure out a way to get you stronger, to compete, more physically at this level. And so we started to seek some help from a guy here locally named Eddie Enriquez, who is always will have a special place in our heart as well. He's right up there with the Mark Henrys of the world as guys who saw something early and said, hey, I can help. And so we did a lot of work on speed and explosion, and then later got into a little bit more of the true, trying to help gain some weight, get in the weight room and really get after it. But that junior year, we saw him begin to really play with confidence. And when I say play with confidence, I mean coming downhill and not being so concerned about, am I doing the right thing, but committing to something and then doing it at, breakneck speed. Continued success in the return game when we could get anybody to kick him the ball. That's right. That becomes something that's almost comical.
Right.
When you go, hey man, just give him a shot. Somebody kick the ball and let's let it land in bounds. At least we got a shot.
Maybe they did a little homework because the film said it.
Right. And I get it. Right. It's the same thing though. You're dealing with a fierce competitor who comes over after the game. He's like, golly, man, I just want a shot at it. Just give me a shot. And you're like, you got to understand, man, that's part of that working while you wait. Stay ready so that when they make the mistake, you're ready to capitalize on it. Right. And we also saw at that time, Mark, when there were mistakes, that's really where I can go back to and say, I know how he bounced back because he'd been dealing with the failure aspect of the one-on-one nature of baseball for all these years. And it was just like, okay, I gotta get rid of that one. We've always said, flush it, move on, get ready for the next one. And again, every failure is going to put you closer to that next opportunity for success. But we did begin to, as a group, right, as a family unit, start to say, okay, man, there's something here. You're a little bit different. I hate to say that we sat around and been like, hey, you're the greatest thing since sliced bread, because we never did that to him. We're big believers in, a humble mind is one that's going to be primed for success. The guy who thinks he's got it all sorted out is going to be the first one to get knocked down off that high horse. Right. So we would reinforce with them, you got to continue to be ready. And, there's always something to improve upon. And then that really, we look at, the spring, at that point, track had essentially fallen by the wayside. We just never were in a position. We couldn't get all of the pieces put together between the baseball side and the track side, to ever allow him to train effectively enough to really compete, and it's one of the things that I think that if we failed at something in this, that was one of the bigger ones, was not being able to put him in a position as a collective group of adults between parents, coaches from one sport and another, to say, hey, this is something that's going to have a direct, and when I say direct, I mean, we all know now how coaches, their first question is, what are your track times? And that's a tough question as a skill guy to not be able to answer and have to say, well, I think I could do this, but I didn't run track because I was playing baseball, So it's one of those things I think that became a setback, right? One of those things, the obstacles that had to be overcome. But just like you said, we felt like there was a little bit of a buzz, and it showed up in every way except in the amount of attention given to him by those who it really felt like it was going to matter the most, and that was the coaches, right? The college coaches.
Let's fast forward to that, because I think that's an important piece that we definitely got to touch on before we get out of here. Talking to my guy Tim Meadows down in College Station. His son is now at UTEP, University of Texas El Paso, as a 2024 signee in the early period as a defensive back, really an all-around player. But I'm going to fast forward just a little bit. Junior year was awesome. He played a lot of 7-on-7 going into his senior year, which I think kind of turned the tables on where you see him at. Now, you mentioned the recruiting process, and that's where we're going now. Trace is one of those kids that kind of flew under the radar. And you mentioned the track times. That's probably something that they didn't see, because everything is about speed when you look at translating to the next level. And those are like you mentioned, those are the first things that college coaches want to pick apart and dissect when it comes to, even on the baseball side, they want to know what that 60 time is. They want to know what that velo is. Those are indicators to where you project. And everything about the recruiting process is where you project at the next level. And that trickles down from the NFL. That's just how evaluations are done when it comes to, any sport. But
Analytical. Right? I mean, it's all become analytics. And they've got to be able to – the numbers have to stand.
Right. You got to be able to put it on paper and match it up. You know what I mean? And those are the type of things. But in Trace's case, he has a pretty good junior year. Going into his senior year, he's one of the leaders coming back at the A&M Consolidated. And he's pretty known in that area, but across the state, there was, a little bit of a buzz, but not where you wanted it to be. But his senior year is where you could see, you spoke about the confidence and things. All of these things started to translate on the field, on the film that you started to see. Of course, I'm privy to seeing it pretty much every week. But, those are the type of things that I saw early that I knew that could happen. But, at this particular time, he's hovering around 6 feet. He's about 190, 200. His body has changed. His development in all his other aspects of being an athlete from a standpoint of being explosive, and those things started to take off. We're talking about a guy that's leaping over guys in the open field, real twitchy, with the power to run the football. They even lined him up in the Wildcat. You started to see all of these things come full circle. The offers started to come in, but it's not a legitimate offer where he can commit to it or say, hey, this is where I'm going. He gets an offer and commits to Utah Tech, midway part of his senior year. But, knowing Trace, he always felt like he could still continue to level up. And, in conversations that we had behind the scenes, you guys always kept that open door. You committed early, but you always kind of kept it in your back pocket that, hey, we feel like we can continue to develop and continue to put up these numbers, which were very good on both sides of the football. And a deep playoff run, I think, also connected the dots to when the offseason came, right after the state championships were over here in the state of Texas. Those are the type of things that contributed to where he is now. But speak on that real quickly, just a little bit, the recruiting process and how it ended up happening to UTEP.
I'll do my best to be quick. It's not my specialty, but
no doubt, you're good.
The Utah Tech situation really was an evaluation at the end of the summer of what we had, right? We had a handful of offers. Not nearly all of them were committable. We made a circuit. You know, we did a lot of traveling, went to a lot of different places. And frankly, he didn't have the greatest camp run that anybody's ever put together. You know, coming off of that spring of playing baseball, which unfortunately doesn't lend itself to developing a football, skill set when you're spending a lot of time every afternoon, you know, standing around, frankly, at baseball practice. And you're dealing with a kid who's a good student, so he's spending a lot of time, you know, also studying and trying not to just overwhelm him, right? Trying to find the happy medium. Well, that summer showed that we had some guys that had offered him based on something, and then the committable nature of those offers didn't pan out. And so Utah Tech was at the end of the summer, before fall camp of his senior year, was the best option in hand, right? And we encouraged him to consider, like, even if you commit, you're not off limits. Your phone is going to continue to ring. You can tell everybody exactly that. I'm committed. You can continue to take the phone calls, because we also know that the nature of that relationship becomes, you know, there's two sides. And in the case of Utah Tech, you know, unfortunately, at the end of the fall season this year, their staff got let go. So that commitment was really no good. You know what I mean? They got their coach in place just a couple of weeks before the signing period, the early signing period. But what we did have was a really long-standing relationship with J.J. Clark, who at the time was the defensive coordinator at Austin Peay University up in Tennessee. I was working for a guy up there named Scotty Walden. And relationship-wise, we were really, really strong with him. And that's a big thing in our world, our family's world, is you know, if you're going to go somewhere and do something, you've got to be surrounded with people that you love and that love you and that are invested in you. And JJ, Coach Clark was all in on the Trace Meadows show after week 3 of the fall, seeing him with the position change and the added size and strength. And but as it all turned out, the Utah Tech staff gets let go, and literally in real time, Mark, Coach Dimmel at UTEP gets let go. Well, lo and behold, who gets that job? It's Scotty Walden. Scotty Walden takes his entire staff from Austin Peay and moves them across to UTEP. And so we get a call almost immediately that, hey, man, we thought all along that you belonged at that level. You know, you're at worst a group of 5 player, and that they were feeling they were going to steal him, you know, out of Texas up into Clarksville, Tennessee in an FCS program. So they said, come to UTEP. And all it took was a trip out to El Paso to fall in love with what UTEP is, but already having a year worth of maybe the tightest relationship with Coach Clark and that staff, and Coach Walden and his whole group, to say, hey man, this is where you belong. You belong with us. Now we leveled up, so you're going to level up and you're coming with us. So, you know, all these things, they happen, it all happened so fast, you know what I mean? But it happened at the same time as, like you mentioned, the success that he had on the field, and the deep run that they were able to have here at Consol with the new coaching staff. The level of attention right there at the last minute, it came up. And, you know, Texas State offered late, North Texas offered late, but frankly, we couldn't as a family, and Trace in particular, couldn't reconcile making that type of a, you know, lifetime decision based on a couple of weeks, you know, of relationship with guys that frankly he'd been trying to recruit for more than a year and not getting anything back, when you've got, you know, Coach Walden and Coach Clark that are now at that same level and that are saying, hey man, you're still the guy that we know and love, and we want you to be a part of this with us. So come on. So at that point, the decision-making got pretty easy, for Trace's sake. And his mother and I signed off on it well before he actually pulled the trigger on it.
Well, that's what we wanted to have, you guys talk about today. It's a process where you have to trust it. And listen, it's very cliche, and it sounds cliche, and it feels so out of whack when you're going through that process. But you have to go through the process in order to get there. And Tim, we had these conversations years ago privately, right. And, myself and Trace, whenever he reached out, and to see it come to fruition and come to the surface where he went and going on, we talked back and forth all through the season, and you were very adamant that, hey, Utah Tech is the spot. This is what we're going to do. But relationships, development, trusting yourself, believing in yourself, and betting on yourself are all of the key points of today's show, talking about Trace Meadows. And he's at UTEP. First of all, congratulations to him. And, I'll send this to him and when we get done. And, I'm sure he'll look at it. And, you guys did a commendable job of doing those things to do and get the right exposure at the next level. And it paid off. And now your early investment is paid off on the long-term investment, which is an education. And he gets to do something that he loves. But before we get out of here, what I want you to do in 30 seconds is give these parents and players something to chew on about this whole process in a short and sweet answer, just a key point to let them know what it means to trust that process before we get out of here.
No doubt. I think it's pretty straightforward. Parents, you cannot hide your children from adversity. You cannot hide them from the invaluable, irreplaceable experience of failure. They've got to fail. It's the hardest thing that you'll do as a parent is to knowingly sit there and allow your child to not succeed at the highest level. But without it, there's no path forward. The other thing that I think that you've got to have is you've got to have people around you who are willing to tell you the truth, even when you don't want to hear it. You've got to hear the truth because, sugar in your ear is only going to get you, it's only going to get you fat at the table. It's not going to get you anywhere that you can do anything with. You've got to have, you got to seek out, and you've got to surround yourself with those that will give you the hard truths. And from there you can make your plan, and then invest in the relationship with your child, with your athlete. You're going to have to talk to them about things that don't matter so that when the things that do matter come up, it's easy to talk. And that was something that we had trouble with, frankly. It wasn't until I surrendered and we went and got some help and learned how to talk to each other. But you can't hide from the hard stuff, and you got to have people that you can trust and it'll tell you the truth.
Well, we appreciate you joining us today again, right here on the On Your Mark Show every week. Wednesday, live from the Fishbowl Radio Network, powered and sponsored by Epic Sports Apparel. Every play I compete. For Tim Meadows, myself, shout out to everybody that tapped in today. J Mac, my guys, Byron Allen, Coach Jay on the road, Prince Njoku. Appreciate everybody for tapping in. And remember, follow the On Your Mark Show YouTube channel. Click, like, and subscribe. We want to educate and elevate you on a weekly basis about all things on the recruiting process and getting that exposure. We'll tap in with you next week right here at the Fishbowl Radio Network, the On Your Mark Show. Take us out with my guy Manor Mike. Follow him on Instagram. And shout out to my guy Scott Rapp for the clip. We're out.
Hey, this Manor Mike. I'm not sure what you own, but this here is on the mark. Like a spiral from a 5-star recruit, we throwing darts, really focused. WD-40 couldn't stop the way we grinded. In the trenches, putting that work in, I relate to all my linemen. This is for the men, the boys do not belong here. Tiptoeing to the top, we doing cone drills. The hottest show in the world, you don't even gotta search. Steady putting in work, you see the sweat up on my shirt. They wasn't aware of us at first, we wasn't on their radar. Now every play that we make, they gon' say, oh, similar to a razor blade, we gon' stay sharp. The news ain't official if it's not on the mark.